Hello, everyone, and welcome to another webinar of our mental health series. These webinars explore various mental health topics with expert comments and tips through the lens of international students and newcomers to Canada. They were developed by the Family and Mental Health Services of COSTI in collaboration with Orientation to Ontario, O2O, and International Student Connect IAC programs to raise awareness and provide support. My name is Nawara, and I'm the bilingual coordinator at COSTI's Orientation to Ontario and International Student Connect programs. Today's webinar is about adapting to change, addressing culture shock, separation, and loss. This webinar will help you understand how culture shock, separation, and loss impact mental health. It will also enhance your skills and teach you coping strategies to deal with emotional distress. To help us understand this topic better, we have Vince Pietropaulo with us. Vince Pietropaulo is the General Manager of COSTI Family and Mental Health Services. In his current position, he has worked with ethnocultural communities in program design, development, and implementation in the areas of mental health, domestic violence, and problem gambling. Vince currently sits on the York Region Violence Against Women Coordinating Committee, Ontario Resource Group on Gambling, Ethnicity, and Culture, the North York Specialized Courts Advisory Committee, National Trauma-Informed Care Project National Advisory Committee. Vince is a subject matter expert on the Immigrant and Refugee Mental Health Project. Recently, Vince designed and implemented the Refugee Mental Health Program at COSTI. Vince has presented extensively on the issue of domestic violence, men's violence, and problem gambling at conferences in the United States and Canada. He has guest lectured at York University and Ryerson University. Without further ado, we will now start. Thank you, Vince, for being here with us today.
And thank you for the very kind introduction, Laura. I'm glad to be here and talk about a very important issue, specifically as it relates to international students. Of course, that is about how to adapt to change and addressing the main issues of separation, loss, and of course, culture shock. Today, we're going to define and have a better and clearer understanding of what culture shock is, what are the indicators of culture shock, the 5 stages of culture shock, and then how to cope. And of course, embedded in culture shock is essentially the elements of change. And when we make changes from one country to the other, we also suffer separations and loss, which all become part of and encapsulate some of the whole philosophy and understanding of culture shock. So understanding culture shock. And the first, we're going to look at what exactly is and what do we mean by culture shock. So often, the way we define culture shock is that it is a feeling of disorientation, and we experience it, or anyone experiences this, regardless of where they're from. So it's kind of a universal feeling, and it's experienced by anyone who is surrounded by an unfamiliar culture, way of life, or a new and different set of attitudes. It can take place at any time as you move from a familiar culture to one you are unfamiliar with. Now, there are ways to minimize this feeling of disorientation, and by trying to prepare for what you will face in new cultures. It's likely you still feel some discomfort, of course, as you adjust and get used to a new place. And it doesn't mean that there's something necessarily wrong with you. It's only natural to need time to process new things, become accustomed to new things, and essentially adapt to new things, new ways of seeing things, new attitudes, and of course, a new way of life. So now we're going to talk about some examples of culture shock that often people experience and what prompts culture shock. Difference in weather and weather patterns. Canada has 4 seasons dominated by winter, cold weather. Acclimatizing to the weather may be a challenge for many international students. Language barriers, understanding local slang and accents, When you're in a new place, of course, there's different public transit systems, so modes of transportation, how to get from one place to another and getting accustomed to these differences. And of course, dress codes, how you see people, how people dress differently, whether it's face coverings to nudity, and then understanding or acclimatizing oneself to local festivals or culture. So you may celebrate different festivals and different religious holidays in your culture or country of origin, and then having to having to celebrate some new holidays. So all these are part of culture shock. And of course, food, which is so important, a big part of any culture, and exploring the cuisine, having to eat perhaps unknown foods, not having access to foods that bring, of course, for many of us, cultural foods are very nostalgic and are very comforting. And then, of course, even when eating in restaurants, right? The social and tipping norms that may be different from one country to the other, and some from any. It could be even navigating the units of measurement, so Celsius versus Fahrenheit, imperial versus metric. So these are some examples of the changes that one may face that can be disorienting and take some time to assimilate and get accustomed to. So what are some of the indicators, of course, of culture shock? And we're going to look more carefully and in detail. So feeling homesick and missing the way things are done back home. Many international students, as maybe not in the first week or so, when there's the initial excitement of change and the exuberance of coming to a new country, but once one starts to settle, they may miss their family, they may miss the way things were done, the routines from their own culture and their country of origin. Spending a lot of time on your own, of course, and avoiding contact with local culture and people, feeling uneasy, perhaps unsure or anxious to engage because you don't know perhaps the social norms or the customs. If one starts to feel depressed or sleeping excessively, again, a way to avoid. Perpetuating stereotypes of the people and the culture, becoming very critical of the local culture and ways of doing things, being irritated by small setbacks or differences. And then, of course, eating or drinking too little or too much. And these are often indicators. Lacking any motivation to explore or to complete needed tasks. And here's a more, I think, extreme indicator of culture shock when people start to become paranoid and feeling uneasy about their safety. And that's really, really key, where they're starting not to feel safe in this adopted country, where international students, where you may come to live for a while as you pursue your academic career. There may be specific issues related to your academic experience with respect to culture shock, whether it is discussing grades openly versus thinking that it's personal information. So different norms really around social etiquette when it comes to the way things may be done in academic institutions that one is used to in their country of origin versus perhaps the rules and the norms in Canadian institutions. So discussion-based classes versus lecture-based classes, addressing professors by their first name versus perhaps formally calling them by their titles and last names. So these are some subtle differences. And things like even being able to eat and drink in class and what is expected behavior in class versus what perhaps one may be used to or be aware of and be comfortable with in their country of origin. Again, feeling nervous about communicating in English in class, so sometimes being reserved and sort of feeling anxious or avoiding expressing an idea or engaging in any particular discussion. So it can really affect academic performance. and understanding of content and material. So when we look at, and we had talked about in the agenda, the 5 stages of culture shock, and the first stage, of course, is the honeymoon stage. And as we had stated earlier, that this stage is filled with overwhelmingly positive feelings, which can last, as I had stated earlier, for a week or even a few months, where one feels the excitement, the energy, everything is new, everything's exciting, it feels exuberant. However, and you may feel you're on an adventure, and you may look forward to and enjoy learning, meeting new people, trying different foods, and engaging in some cultural events and new experiences. During this phase of culture shock, you'll start to identify things that are similar and different between the new and your home culture. The next stage, of course, is the negotiation stage, and this is often characterized by feelings where one may feel irritable, anxious, perhaps even frustration, and at times, in extreme forms, hostility. And these feelings really manifest and stem from being unable to really understand or comprehend things, being unable to speak or read the language on signs or menus. They can also be recognized when something small causes you to overreact with anger or tears, from misplacing your shoes to spilling a drink. So as you can see, during the negotiation stage of culture shock, we're starting to see a shift in mood from exuberance and positive energy to irritability, anxiety, and frustration, and usually over small things. In the third stage, we have the adjustment stage, where routine will start to set in and life will be even keel for a bit. You'll start accepting the different ways things are done and find ways to cope with the local culture and really to feel more comfortable and confident. And typically in this stage, as you start to become familiar with the local culture, foods, language, customs, and traditions, you may have made some new friends, or you started to understand and feel familiar with the way things are done. So this is part of adjusting, and you've gone through the excitement process. You've negotiated some of the differences and discriminated and compared, and now you're kind of adjusting and getting used to, and you have some perhaps other students that you've identified and created some social opportunities for. And now we move into the next stage. And in this stage, called the adaptation stage, sometimes known as the bicultural stage, you start to adapt and accept the new culture as your own. This is the stage at which you find acceptance to your new surroundings. You begin to feel like you belong and really understand and appreciate the culture that you're now part of. In this stage, you've beat the feelings of isolation and loneliness, and now you have new friends, activities to look forward to. You're excited about trying some of new foods that you've adopted as your favorite foods, and you engage and feel comfortable in any social or cultural situation. The fifth stage is the re-entry shock, sometimes referred to as reverse culture shock. And re-entering your own culture can be a shock in itself. So this is once you go back and perhaps you've completed a year of study and you've gotten accustomed to how things are done in your adopted home in Canada, suddenly may be hard to adjust to the life you've always led and the way things are done. This stage of culture shock typically kicks in only upon a return home after being gone for an extended period of time and may not apply necessarily to international students where they're here for a short time. However, it can, because usually when we look at stays for international students of 6 months to a year, this can be a long time, especially over a long fall and winter. Now, we're going to look at ways that one can cope and mitigate and minimize the emotional reactions and the disorientation that come with culture shock. Following a routine, of course, is really, really important. as it promotes a sense of purpose and normalcy. The importance of eating well, getting enough sleep, engaging in physical activity can promote better mental health. Avoiding drugs and alcohol, which may numb, diminish your senses, and they may initially help you cope with negative emotions. However, in the long run, things can become worse. As a way of coping, it's not a very effective or healthy way, and it could lead to more unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy patterns in lifestyle. Keeping away, of course, from comparison. So over idealizing and avoiding the idealization of what life was like back home. Try to make the most of your new home and try to keep an open mind. See coming to a new culture and a new country as exciting. Be open to trying new things. Avoid comparing what things were like or what was better about home, and just enjoy the moment and the present. And the best way to do that, again, is to engage in as many new experiences as possible. Keep communicating and get to know the locals as much as possible, even if you feel like withdrawing. So immersing yourself in local customs, trying the different foods, engaging in different physical activities that one may not necessarily have been exposed to, and even reading up on it and perhaps joining. And once you make friends, and again, moving away from any comparison with, we don't do this back home, it's better back home, but just enjoy the adventure of immersing yourself in a new culture. Again, focusing on the positive, and that's one way that you can do that is by practicing gratitude. So you look at the positive aspects of your life, look at the opportunity that studying in a new country and being an international bring, the day-to-day opportunity to meet new friends, and again, revisit why you started the journey to begin with. What was it about international travel and studying abroad that would be beneficial? What are the benefits? Where did the idea come from? And why you so eagerly or intended on doing that as a way to cope with maybe some of the difficulty in adapting. Finding yourself a project such as learning how to prepare a local dish, or keep yourself busy as well. And again, keep in mind that this is a new journey, and every day affords a new opportunity for new experiences. And that is very, very, very important way to stay positive and staying in the moment. And always be realistic about your expectations, and this is key. Understand your academic expectations will reduce your anxiety about schoolwork. Not only you're adjusting to a new country, but you may also be learning how to handle different academic system, which is not easy to navigate. It may be a very different system from your home country. And the way that is really helpful is to get to know who your professors are, your advisors, schedule interviews, engage in discussions with classmates, develop learning clubs and learning groups for each class and for each subject, and learn about what is expected at your institution. Reach out to international student services on campus, and many universities and college now are aware that there are many international students attending, and there is supports of all kinds available on campus to help you navigate through the new city or town that you're living in and get acclimatized not only to the weather, of course, but also to some of the cultural events, cultural practices, and norms. And also the most important thing is learning how to relax. Often when you feel lonely, when you feel isolated, it's very, very difficult to engage in leisure activities. And you have the time, but turning that leisure time and investing in a new relaxing activity is really, really important. And that could be done by exercise and stretching, reading, of course, music, meditation and prayer, journaling, and hobbies that you can adapt and bring to really help to relieve any particular stress associated with these feelings of separation and isolation. And of course, the best way is to stay connected and to socialize to overcome culture shock. So getting to know the students in your class that may come from different parts of the world and socializing with those students is often easier since they share perhaps certain perspectives, but also reach out to Canadian students as well to learn about local entertainment, local activities, and really learn more about the culture. And the more you immerse yourself and learn and educate yourself about the culture, about your surroundings, it's helpful to eliminate and reduce any anxiety, any fears, or any unknowns. And this can be done by joining clubs and meetups organized by the school and participating in these events. And you'll find others going through the same experience that you may feel if you don't feel as isolated or perhaps even stigmatized. And you can share about your experiences, perhaps your frustrations, your disorientation. And once often that's acknowledged and validated by others who feel the same way, it's a great way to process, normalize, and feel better, because you're not the only one who may be experiencing these feelings as you come to a new place of study. Try to join a class or group based on your own personal hobbies and interests. And of course, there are many online groups now that are available if you cannot attend in person. And it's normal to miss your friends and family back home. And with today's technology, being able to use Skype and WhatsApp and other international messaging apps and are free, and this is a great way to keep in touch and connect with loved ones and people that you miss as you start your journey as an international student. I'm now going to pass it over to Nara, and again, thank you for the opportunity. And Nara, I pass it to you.
Thank you so much, Vince, for a thorough presentation on addressing culture shock, separation, and loss. Now I'll briefly talk about the O2O program, which is a bilingual program funded by Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, and the Government of Ontario. This program has been designed to expedite and facilitate the settlement of newcomers to Ontario and help them make better informed choices. You can visit our website to have access to our resources and also contact us via email or by telephone. We also have the International Student Connect program, which offers settlement information and orientation to international students pursuing a post-secondary education in Ontario. The Ontario Ministry of Children's and Community and Social Services is funding the International Student Connect project to provide support to international students and their families. You can visit our website to have access to the ISC resources and contact us via email or by telephone as well. Costa Immigrant Services is a community-based multicultural agency with 18 locations in Toronto, the region of Peel and York region. Costa provides services in more than 60 languages. Last year, over 40,000 individuals, newcomers and refugees, received assistance in the Greater Toronto area. Costa Immigrant Services also manages the O2O and ISC programs. A special thank you to Vince Pietropaulo for collaborating with us and for developing these mental health webinars. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.